Well, good evening, everyone. I think we should kick things off. My name's Guy Dauncey, and I'm sharing this evening presentation with Jain Alcock-White and Laura Augustine, and any of us who want to chip in. And we'll start today the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation by acknowledging that we live on the traditional lands of the Shtaminis and the Nanaimo First Nations. And I'm just going to share my screen briefly again here. Today's been a special day, and I know that for people who've been through the residential school system, it's a day of pain, of anger, of grief, of disbelief that as a country, Canada used the children to impose its will, to try and sort of create a form of cultural genocide, as one of the people said in the 1920s, to drive the Indian out of the Indian. One of my recent pieces of reading has been this book called 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph, which I recommend. And it's quite amazing when you read what's in the Indian Act. It wasn't really, I believe, an attempt at assimilation at all. It was an attempt at downright domination and suppression. One little piece is when people living in reservations were encouraged to grow food, and they did so successfully, and they wanted to sell it outside the reservation. They were told, no, you're not allowed to do that. They were not allowed to compete in the market with white traders. It's a very oppressive system. So CBC has a page called Beyond 94. 94 is the 94 recommendations of the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation. And it actually spells out, how many have 13 are complete, 20 are not started, 32 in progress, 29 in progress. And this next slide shows just how complicated it is. This is the final sort of 40 slides. And each of these is, you can see the work and the effort is needed. And it's an essential part of Canada rewriting our history and coming to understand what it took to create such anger and distress and pain and trauma and suffering and death, of death of many of the children who were sent to those schools. So these are, the Cable Bay Trail lands are the traditional lands of the Nanaimo First Nation. From their website, they say that in order for the settlers to access the rich coal deposits in Nanaimo territory, the Crown and the Nanaimo entered into the Treaty of 1854. The history of Nanaimo since the arrival of the settlers has been one of strength, perseverance, and endurance in the face of injustice, colonial oppression, disease, and prejudice. As a reflection of Crown laws, policies, and actions, treaty promises have been broken, Nanaimo villages unlawfully alienated, a foreign system of government imposed through the Indian Act, and family and kin systems interfered with. So that's the context for this. This evening, it is quite a complex process to understand the Cable Bay Trail area. If we make any errors, we apologize, and we'll post clarifications in the commentary under the YouTube video when we post that. So this is the Cable Bay Trail that starts from Nicola Road and goes up to the ocean. And these are just some photos of the beauty of the trail to remind us of why almost 18,000 people have signed the petition to say, please, let's not lose this. Let's not have it a narrow strip of greenery with a resort center on one side and industrial on the other. There's incredible beauty in these lands. And I will admit that we have not yet started to engage with the Nanaimo in a joint discussion of the future of these lands. It's been a seat of the pants, all volunteers out there just trying to do what people can without any funding or support. The trail comes down to the ocean, and the sort of the way that wildlife thrives at the ocean is so, it's a sign of health that we have such flourishing habitat and biodiversity. So the petition to preserve and expand the Cable Bay Trail this morning had 17,755 signatures. It has been amended to include the lands within the City of Nanaimo, So the petition is evidence that the city voters don't approve development on the land surrounding Cable Bay Trail. And we're also calling on the RDN and the city to work together to increase the existing trail space and protect the trail from future development attempts on both RDN lands and City of Nanaimo lands. So there has been money put together to get this advertising on the bus. And Jackie did ask me to say that if anyone can chip in to help pay for another month, it costs $2,100 for 4 buses for 1 month. And if you want to just, Jane, if you can put Jackie's email in the chat box so that people can contact her if they're willing to chip in and help get more advertising on the buses, that'd be great. So understanding the Cable Bay Trail area requires understanding ownership, contrast between the city and the RDN, the zoning, OCP designation, and the Reimagine Nanaimo process. So this can be a bit mind-boggling, so strap yourself in and don't be distressed if you get confused by what's coming up, because we've all been confused by this. Since 1854, the lands have been owned first by the Dunsmuirs through the E&M land grant and then by various settlers. Sometime over the last 20 years, the lands in question were purchased by Wilf Richards of the Ocean View Golf Resort and Spa Limited in Calgary, Alberta, as an investment game, you should say, to make money. To understand this process, the bottom line of everything that happens, ideally, is the official community plan that sets guidance and direction. That is expressed in a local area plan, and that is turned into law through zoning bylaws, which then gives strength to development permit areas. An OCP without an accompanying bylaw has no strength at all. So these will be covering all of these 5 components. So, and to the north of that line is the city territory, and south of it is the Regional District of Nanaimo. And the lands in question that are owned by Wilf Richards are, again, in 2 parts, City of Nanaimo and RDN. And there's the Cable Bay Trail coming off Nicola at the south. These are the parcels that he owns, that he wants to develop on both sides, as you'll see. And this is the City of Nanaimo zoning map. So the red land is zoned industrial, and the brown land to the right, up adjacent to Jain Park, is zoned agricultural, rural, residential. At the same time that a change was made to the OCP, which I'll come to, the City of Nanaimo voted to include the entire area within its urban containment boundary, allowing housing to be built anywhere within those lands in principle. In 2010, Nanaimo's official community plan was changed to designate the eastern lands as a resort center following a request by the owner. And there was controversy at the time. A lot of people in Cedar had a lot to say about that. They weren't happy about it, but it was, the OCP designation was changed. So although it's designated as a resort center in the OCP, it is still zoned as agricultural, rural, residential. Important distinction. The purple lands are designated industrial in the OCP and zoned as well. So there's coherence in the zoning and designation with those lands. Every proposed rezoning must include a public hearing. So when land is rezoned, it's an application, it goes through first, second, and before third reading, the public has its say. So there's no legal possibility that we get shut out of this process. The definition of resort center, a destination resort with mixed use, a core of recreational commercial uses, I shan't read all this. Comprehensively planned resort community, residential, commercial, open space, public recreational, with complete walkable communities, economic development. So in 2014, the owner put one proposal forward that was not approved, so it's now history, but I'm showing you what was in his mind for a full combination of golf course and resorts and all that sort of stuff, covering the entirety of the lands, with this kind of development in mind. And he actually looked to have a road entrance off Barnes Road up onto Nicola, requiring a widening of Nicola to 2 lanes, and all the traffic coming in from the south would be going through the Holden Corso chicane. and more entrants ideally coming in off Phoenix Way in the north. None of that has been approved. In 2020, another proposal was brought forward for the east side lands, which were not approved, but never been brought forward properly, basically for a golf resort with a golf course and lots of RV lots, and then acreages right the way down to the ocean front on the right-hand side, on the eastern side. So lots of RV lots all over the place, all to the east side of the Cable Bay Trail. And this is another proposal in 2020 that's contradictory to that. This is a whole bunch of small housing units, suburban sprawl throughout the whole thing. Not quite up to the shoreline because it gets steep and it's not so easy to do development there. Ocean View has easements in its favor to access through Phoenix Way in the north of this land, although that's not been clarified yet. And they're proposing to put a new road in off Phoenix Way. When the land was for sale, the lands east of the Cable Bay were offered for sale for $15 million. They're not on the market, so that price doesn't apply at the moment. And there you have the east side lands, which were 15 million, and we have the west side lands. This is not counting the lands in the RDN, south of that line. For the west side lands, the proposal was to use it entirely for industrial. And so if you look closely at this, this is one of the developer's plans. All those lots are industrial lots, basically concrete, asphalt throughout the whole thing, right up to the edge of the trail, apart from the 15-meter buffer that's on the trail at the moment. I think it's 15, maybe it's 30, 15, I think. And the value of this land was also, if you leave the bold print at the bottom, the evaluation of the regional land supply and feasibility of development has led the owners to consider development of the lands west of the trail for industrial use and presents a great opportunity to fill the industrial land supply gap, which is evident throughout British Columbia. And they've had some encouragement from the city for that purpose. The west side lands, to read the bottom paragraph, they're currently at the top, they're currently zoned, remember, as agricultural rural resource. At the bottom, it says the owners have received strong support from the City of Nanaimo staff and elected officials to consider change of zoning for the west side lands to allow industrial uses. This is also a marketing pitch, we should say. They've also said that when fully developed, they see these lands being valued at $130 million. And the purchase price of the 3 parcels to the west of the trail, undeveloped, are 15 million, coming up $16 million when they were on the market. They're not on the market now. We don't really know what's happening. Taken together, there's an asking price of $31 million for these lands, which makes it really challenging for community groups to chip in and see if they can buy them. So the City of Nanaimo is developing a new OCP, and they're using the Reimagine Nanaimo process to do that, which is a very creative, forward-looking way to approach this. And the City of Nanaimo has also adopted the donut economy principles to guide all future development. So the donut economy principles were developed by an economist in Britain called Kate Rayworth, where the ecological ceiling is the barriers we should never cross because it's a threat to ozone depletion, ocean acidification, freshwater loss, loss of biodiversity, climate crisis. And the inner brown areas are areas where we need to create a solid social foundation so that everyone has guaranteed energy, water, food, health, education, income, peace and justice, social equity, gender equality, secure housing, stuff like that. So the pale green is the safe and just area for humanity. And it is the City of Nanaimo's goal that all future development fits within that safe and just space for humanity. So the Reimagine Nanaimo people have taken the donut and they've looked at the outer circle. It's living within our means, minimizing the harm we do to the natural environment and maximizing the amount of ecological benefit, which is the thing that matters for us here. So the question is, how does any proposed development of the Cable Bay Trail area lands fit into this donut economy framework? Up at top left, it says that City Council voted 5-4 in favor of Ben's motion to adopt the model as a cohesive vision for all city initiatives and planning processes. The donut model challenges economies to meet and exceed minimum global living standards and equity, while avoiding pushing ourselves beyond our ecological limits. So it's a very positive step forward that Nanaimo is doing this. They've been through 3 stages of Reimagine Nanaimo, gathering ideas and information, exploring options, which is just completed. A number of us took part in that. And they'll be now entering phase 3 at the bottom, where they'll be looking for preferred directions to develop into plans, policies, and actions, which will be refined together with the wider community. So they define the Green Nanaimo part of this as how we can support the lands, air, and waters that sustain us, living in harmony with our environment and responding to the impacts of climate change while protecting people, businesses, and infrastructure. It means making decisions that prioritize a resilient and regenerative environment, moving towards a city that gives back to our natural world rather than taking from it. A Green Nanaimo recognizes and embraces its role as a sustainable city that helps maintain the naturalness of our larger region and beyond. So within the Reimagine Nanaimo process, there are 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is under the current official community plan, and it shows that the entire area around the Cable Bay Trail as future resort center. Nothing changes, so it's all developed into a resort. That's without anything adventurous happening. Scenario 2 lists those areas and industrial land expansions. It says that because Ocean View is currently undeveloped, they haven't had a proposal brought forward, but they see increased industrial lands, notably at lands known as Sandstone and Ocean View. So they're proposing more industrial development up there. And in scenario 3, the same applies. They only see it as industrial development in that area. Having said that, a lot of us took part in the interactive workshops with the Reimagine Nanaimo team. And a lot of us really brought to their attention that we were not really unhappy with this almost like being ignored off to the side and no attention being paid to the lands up around the Cable Bay Trail area. So one of the other pieces is that when we look at the future of industrial lands, they don't necessarily have to look like this. This is the lands on the right-hand side of the highway up towards Duke Point. Anyone who's driven to Duke Point knows it's a fairly desolate concrete mess. I'm sure it's productive and effective, but it does nothing for nature. And so alternative ideas for green development are, when you're looking at the landscaping, trees, nature, peripheral buffers, wetlands, habitat features, all this can be incorporated into a green industrial zone. And now the Yellow Point Ecological Society is advancing the idea that the City of Nanaimo might look very seriously at developing criteria for future industrial lands, so they're not just ecologically destroyed. We now come to the RDN lands, that square there, owned by the same company. This is in the OCP listed as rural resource. And part of their text is to protect the natural environment, which they recognize as the Georgia Basin is one of the most biologically diverse areas in North America, and that electoral area A is home to many environmentally sensitive features which must be identified and preserved. Maintaining healthy ecosystems is important for regulating climate, cleaning our fresh water, regulating and cleaning atmospheric gases, maintaining genetic diversity, etc. That land has been listed as a sensitive ecosystem development permit area because of recognition of the coastal bluff, terrestrial, herbaceous, and old forest ecosystems. And when I finish, Jain will go into more detail on the nature of this ecological sensitivity, but it has been recognized as sensitive, in spite of which it was pretty thoroughly logged this spring. And in recognizing the development permit area for this, it's saying that they developed a development permit area for the protection of the natural environment, its ecosystems and biological diversity, and to minimize the impacts of development. However, development may occur within a DPA, provided it satisfies the guidelines. And DPAs are full of loopholes. I haven't seen the specific ones for this, but they're full of loopholes. So what's possible? I got to just let people in. There's 2 people in the waiting room. I need to let them in. I'm going to go back to this one here. We could have a trail connecting to, what we're looking for is a trail connecting the Cable Bay Trail to Joan Park along the top. A trail connecting Joan Park to Cedar by the Sea coming down the right-hand side. Complete protection of the east side of the trail. A widened protection buffer on the west side of the trail. Protection of all ecologically sensitive areas and green industrial lands on the west side. And I'm now going to go to, I'm going to stop sharing and go to the Zoom polling questions around these very same things. And so I'm going to launch the first poll, which says, do you support a trail connecting to connecting the Cable Bay Trail to Joan Park? You can vote yes, no, or maybe. And I'll give it a time to, I know that there's 29 people present, and we've now got 18 responses so far. So I'm waiting for 20, another 8 people still thinking about it. Okay, well, they're not responding, so I'm gonna.
Can we ask for clarification on what that would mean then?
It would mean that a trail from the ocean end, when you reach the ocean on the Cable Bay Trail, you're actually hiking on private land to Joan Park, owned by Mosaic. So Mosaic could choose to do something else, but there's no public land connecting the ocean side of the Cable Bay Trail through to Joan Park at the moment. Anyway, so any more voting coming in? I'll end that poll so you can see what the results are. It's 91% saying yes and 9% saying maybe. So the next poll, where's number 2? Is, would you like to see a trail connecting from Joan Park down the east coast to Cedar by the Sea? There's some gorgeous forest down that, and it's a steep slope. And at the moment, it's all private land, so you have to sort of bushwhack your way through. So
and that's the old growth.
Yes, the old growth is tucked away in there. So we got 19 responses so far. 20 is another. 8 people not responded yet, but I'll give it a few seconds more. More coming in. 24, we're getting up there. Any more responses? Okay, I'll end the poll and share the results. So it shows that 71% say yes, 29% say maybe, and nobody is saying no. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go to the third poll, which is, do you support the complete protection of the lands on the east side of the trail? Now, obviously, there's small print negotiation needs to be made about how that protection is done, but it's in theory, would you like that to happen? So we got 18 responses so far, 19, 20. Anyone else coming in? This is on the right-hand side of the trail as you go up from the south. I'm going to end the poll here for moving along and share the results, which shows that 82% say yes, they do want complete protection, and 18% say maybe. Now I'm going to go to the fourth poll, and there are 6 polls altogether. Do you support a widened protective buffer on the west side of the trail? This is the lands to the left-hand side when you're going up the trail. So that's 17%. 100% have answered, rather. So 18 people rather have answered so far, and 19. Anyone else voting on this one? 20. Anyone else? Final chance. 21 coming in. So I'm going to end the poll here and share these results now, which shows that 95% say yes, they want a protected buffer, and 5% say maybe, which is 1 person. Okay. And the fifth poll, do you support the protection of all ecologically sensitive areas? some very rapid voting happening here. We're up to 21 already. You're getting the hang of this, 23. Okay, I'll end the poll there because we got a rapid response. And that shows that 96% say yes and 4% or 1% is saying maybe. And the final poll, number 6, is: do you support the concept that the development of industrial lands on the west side should be required to be green in various different ways? So we got 16 people voted, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23 coming in. I'm going to end the poll. We now have on this one and share the results. So 91% saying yes, 4% are saying maybe, just 1 person, and 4% saying no. So there's some good discussion to have there. It's a very new concept. So I'm now going to share those results and stop sharing and go back to their share screen to finish off. That's it. So as a reminder, any application for a change of zoning on city or RDN land has to go before a public hearing. And yes, that's the beauty when you get to the end of the trail. So that's my little piece. I'm now going to stop sharing and invite Jain Alcock-White to share the screen with her piece. Jain has lived in Cedar for a long time. She raises her children there. She knows more about plants than all of us put together. If you've been on one of her plant walks, you will know that. Jain, are you okay?
I'm here. Just before I say start, I'm just going to say my screen has been freezing off and on. So if something goes wrong, I apologize in advance.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
You might want to go to full screen.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm way down in my slideshow.
You got it.
I'm going back to the beginning. All right. So this is mostly just an overview of some of the environmental issues, the things that I have sort of picked up on in reviewing all of the various applications, starting with the original environmental assessment that was done in, I think, between 2005 and 2009. And then the most recent one, which was just last September 2020, which had to do with the timber harvesting permit that was issued for the RDN lands. So the land we're talking about, which Guy has already explained, is crosses a boundary between the City of Nanaimo.
Can you pause a minute, Jain?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm seeing your screen. Someone says they're still saying me. I'm not sure why that should be.
Okay.
It's Joan Wagner again. I think other people are probably okay. Can anyone put a note in the chat if you're not able to, Twyla says she can see the presentation, so I would push ahead. I think I'm seeing it fine. You go ahead,
Okay.
Jain.
Okay, so yes, the lands, as Guy has outlined, cross this boundary between the city and the RDN. And it is a little bit confusing, the actual number, the acres of these lands seem to change a little bit from document to document. But from what I've reviewed, there's about 470 acres on the city side and 97 acres on the RDN side. I don't think we've talked about this anywhere, but on the RDN side, they have currently logged about 67 acres, and the remainder is, buffer zones around little maybe streams or wetlands, and there is a herbaceous meadow, which is supposedly a protected area. So that's sort of just the status of the RDN. The original master plan, it was developed in 2009. In 2010, the OCP for the city was amended to designate those lands to resort use to accommodate this golf resort and spa idea. And the designation supports potential rezoning of the area from residential to resort, which Guy has also explained with some good maps. Now, the lands on the RDN side were not in that original master plan for the golf resort. So they were not included in the environmental assessment that was conducted at that time, which was really very expansive. It took 4 years for them to complete, and it's almost a 300-page document. So the RDN lands are still zoned rural resource, which permits a huge variety of things from, as you can see, forest, silviculture, agriculture, home-based businesses. So in 2020, the owner submitted a biological inventory assessment for those RDN lands, seeking approval to clear cut most of the 97 acres, leaving just a little portion, which I just explained. And this is just another map. I'm just going to answer a question somebody had about the trail, which was in the poll. So the trail goes here, and it ends right here in Cable Bay, and Joan Point Park is here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but these
Yes.
lands here are mosaic. So the trail does not actually connect to Dodds Narrows at this time. Just going to say that while we have a picture up. The RDN development permit stipulated that the harvesting has to be conducted in a certain way that was laid out in the inventory assessment. And this talks about buffers around wetlands and watercourses, preserving veteran Douglas fir and rare trees, which would be things like Gary oak trees, retaining a 15-meter buffer along the trail, and not clear cutting during bird nesting season from March 15th to August 1st. It was pretty intense, I should say. Back in March, there was a lot of activity because the logging started very suddenly without really notifying the people who live in that area. And if you go back, you can see it said on their biological inventory assessment, no clear cutting was to occur during bird nesting season, but timber harvesting was conducted for the entirety of March 15th until we were finally able to get RDN staff out late in the day, and it wasn't shut down until about 5 p.m. and they were issued a $500 fine for logging for a whole day, which when they're using I think they're called timber cat or something like that, it's about one tree every 10 seconds. So a lot of trees came down in that day. Now, this biological inventory assessment is a bit unusual. This is just my interpretation because the majority of the data for it came from the environmental assessment that was conducted in 2009 for the Ocean View Master Plan. So that's 12 to 16 years previous for an entirely different parcel of land on the city side. The Ocean View assessment, though, does identify several environmentally sensitive areas with blue listed plants, which are species of special concern. And there are similar environmentally sensitive areas on the 97 acres. However, during the field work that was conducted for the biological inventory assessment, they only really walked, well, it's pretty specific, 5.65 kilometers over 2 days. And it states that they saw no bird nests of concern, no rare plants, no wetlands or water courses that were accessible under the riparian area regulations. However, they also state that the subject property occurs within the coastal Douglas fir moist maritime zone, and all of the terrestrial communities occurring within this zone are listed as endangered or threatened. And Guy showed a slide about that as well. So even though there are a lot of inconsistencies written right into the biological inventory assessment, the RDN issued development permit for timber harvesting. And I did talk to the RDN about that. And because the inventory assessment was conducted by a registered professional biologist, they don't really have any method within their own policies, I guess, to do any further review other than accepting it at face value because it has a stamp from a professional. Okay, so in the RDN, the one environmentally sensitive area is called a terrestrial herbaceous rock outcrop. That's those pale yellow areas. So the RDN lands are that rectangle, and you can see it sort of continues into the city land. So there's just a small little bit here. And it states that the investigation of the small areas did not find any rare plant species. However, as I said before, their investigation was referred to as limited ground truthing on just those 2 days in August and September, which is far beyond peak wildflower season. And the assessment itself stated that had the survey been conducted in May or June, they may have found additional wildflower species that maybe were rare. But we will not know that. Moving on to the city lands now. Those lands have a lot more going on. There's forested sections, there's non-forested areas, which are wetlands and these meadows. And then there's a bunch of anthropogenic activity that has happened. There's a gravel pit, there's lots of hydro roads and several user-made trails, as well as the main Cable Bay Trail, and some selective harvesting has already happened, mostly on the west side. This is a map from the 2009 ecological assessment, or environmental assessment, sorry. And the brown here is all selective harvesting. Pale green is young forest. Yellow is the herbaceous meadows. This area is all a riparian zone. This is old growth, and this is mature forest, all the bright yellow or bright green. And this little boundary is important. That means this is a watershed for these herbaceous meadows, because these meadows actually rely on natural seepage to feed them. They have very thin soil. So any development really within a much greater zone than a small 15-meter buffer has a really great impact on these areas. In the city lands, we have 3 environmentally sensitive areas, and each of those larger areas have a whole bunch of smaller polygons mapped out in them. I won't go into those ones, but the big ones are older forest, second growth forest, and terrestrial herbaceous meadow. The collective area encompassed by those is 384.5 acres. Of that size, there is a lot of it that falls outside of the Cable Bay boundaries and just sort of extends out into the lands owned by Mosaic. And Joan Point Park and those lands are, as I just said, entirely in the second growth forest environmentally sensitive area. And most people maybe don't think of second growth as environmentally sensitive, but it is because it is a buffer for the older growth forest and for the meadows. And we don't want industrial development right up to the edge of something, because that creates an island effect. And this picture here, you can actually see there is my son lying in a branch of a tree, which is in an area that is not classed as sensitive or old growth or anything. It's actually, this picture is in an area that's mapped on the map as young forest. So just another glitch, I suppose, in the mapping. This is a map of those polygons I was just talking about. So this is all the second growth, environmentally sensitive area. This is all older forest. So this is what Guy was talking about, having a trail that connects Joan Point Park all the way down to Cedar by the Sea. There is a bit of a trail in here already, and it goes through the most gorgeous area with giant old growth trees throughout here. And these are the terrestrial herbaceous meadows, which I just would like to point out. Lots of people seem to think these areas are areas that just have been logged. I shouldn't say lots, but I've heard from some, because they look bare and maybe you're not noticing the smaller plants. These are the areas that we commonly sort of know as Garry Oak ecosystems, where they have camas meadows and chocolate lilies and that type of thing. So it is not just an area that's already been logged. This is a view of that big meadow right here, actually. Standing on this right-of-way, hydro right-of-way, looking down, this is what it looks like. This is what happens when we have a hydro right-of-way next to a meadow. We get an influx of invasive plants like broom, which really put these ecosystems at risk. It's very shallow soil. And yeah, you can read my text, is basically what I'm saying. There's also a lot of quad activity in here because it's a great place to do donuts and wreck that shallow soil. And that's why we need these buffers. The second growth forest is really important. It protects these sensitive areas, and those terrestrial meadows on the RDN lands were left with no buffer following the recent timber harvest. It says 15 meters, but if you've walked around there, there's a few trees left, but it isn't a continuous buffer, so it's really ineffective. And in the city land ESAs, they did identify red and blue listed plant species on those terrestrial herbaceous meadows, which, because it is one long continuous stretch, they would have been in the RDN lands had they done their investigation at the right time of year. So red and blue listed, if you don't know what that means, red means native species and communities that are extirpated, endangered, or threatened. And blue listed means species of special concern. So that's important. Seepage is an important feature of these meadows, and that's why that wetland or watershed area I pointed out previously is important, and we need the forest there rather than concrete or RV lots or whatever, which interrupts the flow of water. This is a picture of the far side of that same terrestrial meadow where it still maintains a little bit of its integrity, but this is a very small corner. Here are some of the plants that most people don't see that are in that meadow. This is called Lomatium. It is very rare, very small, easily stepped on. I won't list all these names, but there's several more. I just chose 6 of the prettiest ones to show you, and these are very small flowers. Now, the old growth forest environmentally sensitive area has 2 different ecosystem types. So while overall it means big trees and old trees, there are different forest types within that. It's dominated by Douglas fir and salal in one type, and in the other type, it's Douglas fir, grand fir, and Oregon grape. And these differences are due to things like topography and slope and the way the sunlight shines. So that is why we have a lot of these old growth trees on the Dodds Narrows side, just because of how the topography is over there. And within this area, the trees are big. So DBH means diameter at breast height. You can go and take your measuring tape and measure. Many of these are in excess of 1.6 meters. And to be old growth, it has to be 250 years or older. That is considered old growth. And we have old growth Douglas fir, grand fir, red cedar, maple, and arbutus in these areas. The Douglas fir are testament to the resilience of this ecosystem. Most people may have noticed there's a lot of fire scarring on these trees. And that's really important, because if we lose that resilience, we become more prone to forest fires, which is a big concern these days as climate changes and temperatures are warming and we have these drought type summers. And with this influx of Scotch broom and Himalayan blackberry, we have a lot of fuel, I guess, in the understory that just ignites really easily. And if we don't have these old growth trees, we just put ourselves at risk. The second growth environmentally sensitive area doesn't have as many of those significant trees, and it is a bit more fragmented, but it provides a corridor for wildlife to move through, and it creates buffers for these more sensitive areas, as I already mentioned. This plant is Evergreen Huckleberry. It is along the trail, and it's in a very small little buffer because it's all been logged up on the upper side. So these are some of the veteran trees within the old growth and second growth area. So you will notice a lot of trees have these tags. I think the City of Nanaimo did that previous to the 2009 environmental assessment. I haven't been able to figure out who, but there are about 2,000 trees that have been tagged. These mean they are trees of significance, and they're trees of all different species. They are all pretty much large trees, and they are scattered all over the lands, including in lots of the areas that are either zoned or up to become industrial or a resort or something like that. So this tree here is a cedar. It is alive. I can fit in the middle along with my sister and 3 kids. And you will see it is covered with scarring from fires, you know, who knows how long ago, 150 years or more. And this is in the riparian zone. So this particular tree is protected, but these other trees are all outside of the riparian area. Here is one of those big scarred trees. This is what we need for resilience. And on the other side is what happens when you put a hydro right-of-way right next to a herbaceous meadow, which is supposed to be a protected area. And that is all I have to say. I hope I explain things in a way that makes sense.
Thanks, Jane. When Laura's finished, we'll come back and have lots of time for questions and discussion. So if you want to stop sharing.
Okay, if I can figure that out. There we go.
And now, Laura, we invite you to share your screen and to tell us about the Click Society and the RDN lands. Laura Augustine lives right adjacent to the RDN lands.
Yes, thank you so much. I've got, now I'm going to just do my presentation here. There we are. Can everyone see?
Yes, that's good.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction and help and allowing us to hop in as well. We are a newly formed nonprofit and been inspired by our love of the community and the love of this land. And we felt called to help preserve this area when the RDN lands were logged. With your help and support and the support of the RDN, we hope to restore these lands and make it a public park in a way that would make it safe from future logging and available for the benefit and enjoyment of everyone. Many of you here today have seen firsthand the changes that were felt by the falling of so many trees near the trail. These pictures on the right show many heavily cleared areas, especially where it's most visible to us all near the parking lot. Some good news is that there are a number of areas that have been left undisturbed in these 97 acres. We're talking about the RDN lands, as we mentioned previously. But they include the Gary Oaks and some young arbutus and some large clusters that were not easily accessible due to the rocky terrain. Because of this parcel's location in the RDN, which is not in the city of Nanaimo, this land isn't currently being slated for rezoning or in danger of becoming industrial land at this moment. But if we don't act, this area will be logged again and again until this sensitive ecosystem is overrun by invasives like Jane has shown. And then there would be nothing left to protect. This block in green, of course, is the portion that we're talking about. It's the portion that you see when you park your car. And it is a critical buffer for the community, the trail, and the encroaching development on the Nanaimo side. Those of us who live nearby have already noticed a change in noise level and an increase in smell. Imagine what that will do if we don't do something. Imagine how that will grow. So we need to act. Sorry?
Can I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make a correction here. The gray area that says zone for resort, proposed industrial land, that's proposed resort land. It's in the OCP for resort, and he wants it ideally to zone it for resort, but it's not proposed industrial. Just clarifying that.
Okay, I thought, and thank you for throwing that in there. This was a picture that I had taken from a previous presentation, so I wasn't able to X that out. But okay. It is currently zoned as resort lands, I believe.
No,
and they want to turn it. It's
designated in the OCP as resort land.
Okay.
In order to become a resort, it has to be rezoned. It's currently zoned as rural agricultural. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for that confusion. I really appreciate this. This does not override your much more detailed presentation in the Nanaimo side. I'm purely focused on the RDN piece, and we're really hoping that we would be able to work all together to claim that land as a park. What's interesting about the RDN lands is that because it doesn't actually have the protection of the Local Area Government Act, that's why they weren't able to protect from any logging permits. They were genuinely forced to issue those permits because there's very little protection in rural zoned areas. They don't have a lot of the legalities and legal instruments that that a city has. So that's what's interesting also about this piece, and the fact that they would have to go through an entirely separate OCP process, another town hall, et cetera, for those 97 acres, which would mirror exactly all the efforts that they're putting in for Nanaimo. So it makes sense if you're going to go through that process, you want to do that for the 400 acres, but that's going to leave behind this piece and the RDN. So I see that as, what if this is an opportunity for the community to see if we can take a portion of these lands as well, if they are listening to what you guys are, everybody's proposing here, and widening that trail and increasing that buffer. Why not also have a park that separates the community from all of this encroaching industrial zoning? And what I also wanted to mention as well was, you can look through those lands. I mean, many people do tread and wander on through using those logging roads for expanded trail. What if that was a legitimate thing? What if that was something that we could actually expand and preserve Cable Bay Trail with? In that area, you can see that there are now Gary oaks that are stranded, that are still alive, but they're not looking very healthy right now because, of course, logging happened around them. And once you disturb the ecosystem in which something grew up, as Jain and Guy have noticed and shared, you now endanger those sensitive, those trees and the undergrowth that I'm not nearly as well versed in. But I understand the idea that the environment is a collection and a network of pieces, and it deserves preservation and restoration, or we're going to see it continue to collapse. So my ask is, and I don't know if we've got a poll prepared for this one as well, but let's make this a park. I wanted to share this image from my own backyard, and we stood along our 200-meter boundary watching how they were violating even the paperwork that they had filed. There is a natural creek, just basically from this picture, if I were to look behind. This is a picture of the gentleman who came and talked to me walking on my land side, and showing how that basically that area had been treed just like you see on the right, which is maintained on my side. And he walked through to explain to me that he'd been told to take everything. He had not been aware that there was a natural creek that he was supposed to keep 15 meters boundary on either side. And we stood there for days on end and stopped them and their follow-up predecessors with their chainsaws, who were told to take even more on the days afterwards. So we were able to save maybe about 24 trees in that area that they shouldn't have been able to take. They didn't follow necessarily a lot of their own plans, where they were supposed to put straw bales to protect. You can see that on some of those plans that they had to register with the RDN. They were supposed to put straw bales to stop damming and such from the free flowing rivers. And they did that after I complained, and after they'd already logged the area, and after they actually impeded those streams. So what I thought was very upsetting was that they can get a piece of paper, get it signed off by a professional, and then really behave in a way that they wanted to after the fact with very little recourse. So what I felt after this was, we need this land to belong to the community. We need to stop this from becoming a repeated effort and the mortgage paying option for landowners. So this is why we need to campaign our local area director, Keith Wilson, to get this land on the acquisition list for Parks and Recreation. So this was my little placeholder for a poll. I didn't know if we could toss one up there. No.
No, I can't do it at short notice. It has to be done before.
No, I sent the email earlier. That's okay. You guys were putting together beautiful slides. And you've already asked, would you, in certain ways, does anybody okay with maybe doing a show of hands on the on their app there of who would like to see this become a park? Who would be up for the RDN piece? People can put ideas in the chat, but we can't do a showing of hands while you're holding the screen. Oh, no, you can't do that. I see the little hand app there that people can hopefully respond with. You can put a little hand up yeah.
As long as you're sharing, we can't see everyone's faces.
Oh no, okay. I'm seeing some waves and some thumbs up, and I accept that as an overall. Sounds like an all right plan. And then the next would be, sorry, going back here. How would we want to use this space if it were a park? I've gotten some really insightful feedback from a couple of people who are even on this call right now, talking about, well, if we turned this into a park, would this further endanger nature? Would we be, if we were using this as community gardens in certain spaces, would that stop nature from coming back? Would we be causing more impact? My overall thought was that there are certain areas that have been cleared multiple times that we might decide, well, why not create some small community gardens that take up, a quarter of an acre. But if this is 97 acres and we're able to restore 90 of it, and 7 acres are essentially, for some, community gardens and a couple of flat areas for outdoor music, and we make sure that we fence off areas or allocate zones that people don't walk on. I think that would be an option that would be doable. We would then end up with an additional trail network that people are using anyway, that's already been in place for a number of years. And then we could set out towards removing some invasives and doing some replanting. Yeah. So if you are interested, and it would go a very long way towards helping, reclaim some of this space for the use of the community. Your action here is super important. If you send a personalized letter with this clear ask attached and CCing us so that we can keep track of the number of letters, we can encourage our electoral area director to support this goal. I've already spoken with him, and he said that if we even had 20-25 letters, that would be enough, that he would bring this to the board and then work towards getting this on and with a subcommittee with Parks and Recreation and adding it to the acquisition list. So this would be an actual step forward that we could take as a community and have the support of the RDN, so that we're not trying to fundraise for all of it, and that we're not trying to take privately owned land and turn it into public land all on our own. But this would be the first step. I can copy and paste this text into the chat for your easy reference, but also feel free to email me with any questions, or if you would prefer to drop your email into the chat, I can grab that and send you an email with further instructions if you prefer. But overall, I wanted to share this idea that we're moving forward with, and hope that we have everyone's support. And if not, tell me why, and let's talk about it.
That's great, Laura. Thanks. If you
Thank you.
Stop the sharing, and we can have a 20 minutes of full-on discussion now. So if people would like to sort of